Oh, then we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant, from the Aramaic English translation of the word. The translation is from sources where the Megillas were yet active, and the translation very interesting and very precise, in fact, and it takes a bit yet of filtering while reading it, because lots of words are used from the regular Greco-Roman translation. So then the factor of the prophetic is yet very active in the world, and we understand very precisely the situation of the camps. The camps are returning because the time of Nehushtan in prison has in fact ended, and the only situation holding it is the layer regarding when the Messiah spent a couple days with the Samaritans, giving the understanding of 2,000 years of rulership of the Gentiles. And this time is holding because in Mechichiah, the 24th chapter, it states the reduction of time for the sake of the elect. And when the Messiah spoke regarding the elect, it is regarding the people of the Messiah from the elect Hebraic people. So then when you read the understanding from the 24th chapter of Mechichiah, then you understand what the Messiah meant. The reduction of time for the sake of the elect, because the Messiah knew that the elect would be outside of their perimeters or their camps, and they had to return. Because vengeance is coming and they must be in their positions, so then the revelation can take place. As we understand from the studies, revelation truly starts in the 4th chapter of Revelation. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd chapters are the prelude, and those are in fact part of the understandings from Yohanan. As you can read 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Yohanan, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd chapters of Revelation, they are linked with 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Yohanans. The true revelation starts in the 4th chapter. That's why people should never have the idea of delineation and limits via 66 pieces of codex that were put together. Those people, they were lunatics. Though they had the best intentions of put together a codex, they didn't have a clue what they were translating, because they were never exposed to the Hebraic understanding and the Hebraic prophetic understandings, and they were never involved with the Messiah. However, they did their best in order to put together a codex to make it universal. Try to understand the times they were living in during the time. Because of the so highly influential area of the religion, the leaders of those places, they had to come together and put together a codex, because they had copies of certain areas, copies of the other areas, and they had certain Megillas of certain times, and then the other people had other Megillas, and they were going back and forth with so many scriptures, and they had to put together a form of codex so it would be then universal. But in fact, those people, they did not have a clue what they were translating. So then when we begin to understand the prophetic, it has to be in layers from the time of then Shaul, when he first came out with the understanding of the prophetic shadows of the Torah. As we understand, only half of the Torah and half of the prophets were completed, thus the spring feast. Leviticus is part of the holy laws of Elohim. we understand we are not under the demands of the law, because the demands of the law are related with the dam of animals, and those were completed. However, the second half is not yet completed. And most of the denominations out there, they state that the Torah was abolished. How can they understand the prophetic shadows of Leviticus in a form of prophetic understandings of the future events if they think the Torah was abolished? How can they explain it? They can't explain it. Because they have a copy of Scripture that was scoundrelized. The translators did not understand what they were translating. They taught and they thought that then the areas of the laws were then completed. But the laws, they were not completed yet. Only half of it was completed. Only half. Because the events to come were mixed with the laws. Try to understand. Law, there is a dual understanding of it in double layer. The layer of the laws themselves, and then the prophetic events of the future related with them. So then this is what Shaul was mentioning, the prophetic events to come based upon the Torah and the prophets and the writings. However, when the Greco-Romans, they had a hold of those Megillas, they did not know what to do with them. They were translating in flat surfaces, and they never had a grip of what it was then in layers. However, from the Hebraic viewpoint, then you can understand in layers. That's why then Shaul the Shaliach said the Torah has then the prophetic shadow events, not the substance themselves. When he was then speaking of the feasts, were not the feasts themselves as an act of maintaining the feasts. Related with the prophetic would be a shadow of it, but not the event itself. So then half of the Torah, half of the prophets were completed when he first came. Thus the spring feast. Then half of the Torah, half of the prophets would be completed then in autumn. That's why the feasts are done in couple of understandings. First is the spring, then the autumn. Where do you think in Revelation comes the idea of, and then the sound of the shofar, he will show up? Where do you think that come from? It came from the autumn feast. In autumn there is the sound of the shofar. It's a day and hour that no person knows because of the very nature of the feast. It is in a day that no person knows because of the start of the feast. So then people are more aware of the only half of the Torah, half of the prophets were completed. There is the second half yet. That's why there is so much confusion, because then the Greco-Romans, they try to be above the authorship and trying to be authority over areas they didn't have a clue of. And then to try to gain the trust of the people, then when it came to Cornelius, then they plain lie bluntly. Because Cornelius never had a vision. Not as much as a dream. But because they want to be above than the Jews, then the time was not Jews, because Jews did not exist. The word Jew is a mixture of biblical law with the takanot masim. That's where it came from. The Hebraic people. So the Hebraic people, then, they were involved with the holy laws, and they did understand what they meant. The Greco-Romans did not have a clue, but they wanted to be above the Hebraic people. So when they came of the time of translation of then Cornelius, because he was a Roman centurion, then they want to make themselves important. So they simply translated, oh, wait a minute, this centurion, then he was from Rome, let's then write that he had a vision from heaven. These would place them above the Hebraic people. And they went ahead and they did it. Because there is no vision outside of the camp. That's the problem. If you read very precisely, the Pharaoh of Egypt, he had a dream. Brother Joseph had to go over there and translate for him. Had to be interpreted. The Babylonian king had a dream. Brother Daniel had to go there and take care of it because it had to be interpreted. Miriam, the mother of the Messiah, she had a dream, not a vision. She had a dream because she was outside the camp the time she had the understanding from heaven. However, the angel, during the time she had the dream, he explained it. And then Joseph, the stepfather of the Messiah, also had a dream. And then Shaul, the Shaliach, when he was going to Damascus, the horse had a fit. It was a divine fit that the horse had, and he did, the horse, drop the Shaliach Shaul on the ground, and he hit his head. During the time he was unconscious, then he had the understanding. Because the line of understanding from only having visions in the camps must be maintained. Any person from the Hebraic line having understandings from heaven outside of the camps must be in a form of dream. Daniel the prophet, he did not have visions. He had dreams. Sometimes he would take a walk very far away to be alone in a country, and then when we get to the place, he would take a nap. During the time that he was taking a nap, would come then the dream. The translators, when they were translated, they did not understand the solid foundation of having visions only in the camps. Only the prophets of old, the holy prophets, the Hebraic prophets, sometimes they had open vision of heaven in its understanding, but only when they were in Israel. If you search very cautiously, you find only in Israel the holy prophets had special understandings from heaven. When they were outside of the area of Israel, it had to be a dream. And it was only dream, only dreams. Job, for instance, Job, he had a pride problem. Job was not in line with the Creator. He was so rich, in quote, filthy rich, he began to boast. When he began to boast, then Satan was over there up in heaven and said, what's going on with this guy? He's having some sort of my own type of lifestyle living. Is it not yours or is mine? In other words. And then the Creator said, have you considered my servant Job, the wealthiest in the earth. But then he was boasting because he was very rich. And then Satan was very honest. He said, oh, you have a hedge of protection around him. What do you think? Remove the hedge around him and then let's verify what can be done with him. And then the Creator said, go ahead and do it, only spare his life. And down went Job. But then later he received double, plus. But he had to go through then the procedure of then cleaning him from his boastings. The translator of the word, they had the mistake of making synonymous a person very rich with a person being just or practicing justices. When they translated it, they didn't understand. They thought, oh, the Creator has only favored those that are rich. So they thought then he was rich and then he was practicing justices. But in fact, he was prideful. That's why he was tested. The only person tested and then unjustly trialed was the Messiah. Each and every other person, they had a reason to be tested. So then when we begin to understand the areas of the prophetic, always, every time, when a person is reading from an Hebraic viewpoint, Hebraic line outside of the camps in modern times, then must be sure, must be a dream. So then you understand the distinction from dreams and visions. When you read in Revelation, Yohanan, he had visions, direct line vision from heaven. He was in a camp, protected in the mainland. In the 10th chapter, when you read in the 10th verse, then heaven said to him, you have to go outside of the camp and then prophesied upon then the nations, princes, kings, kingdoms. During the time was obvious, very obvious. By the end of the ministry of Shaliach Shaul, the camps were very popular. Contrary what many people think, that the faith was eroded, in quote, those were the understandings from the Gentiles' viewpoint. The Gentiles were scandalizing themselves very badly because they thought grace was a license to sin. In the camps, it's not required grace. In the camps, it's not required faith, doesn't require grace, doesn't require mercy, because the camps are perfect. They are in the very presence of Elohim. That's why when you read the 20th chapter of Revelation, 9th verse, then you find only the camps and the beloved city, because they are 100% obedient to the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. In these days, don't think that the world is going to come together to try to make up a plan to make this system to work, because it's going to break. Prophet Daniel was very, very precise in what he said. And he saw the statue, and at the base of the statue, iron does not mix with the clay. But then Daniel said, they are going to try to come together in a relationship, but they can adhere to each other. Thus, iron and clay do not mix. So the Greco-Romans, unfortunately, when they began to translate the Megillas, they didn't understand. We must take as a fact of Greco-Romans were not endowed with understanding. They translated the best they could, but they were wrong. Only half of the Torah, half of the prophets were completed, and the other half is not yet completed. So when they stated then the laws, we were then at liberty from the laws, they were wrong. Only half of the Torah, half of the prophets were completed, thus the spring feast. Leviticus 23rd chapter from the 1st verse up to the 21st verse. That's the spring feast. The first layer of completion of the feast, spring feast, was then completed. The demand for them of animals in exchange for sin was completed. The other half can only come because of the completion of the first. Unfortunately, the Greco-Romans were wrong. We must update the word, update ourselves, what we understand, because the second half is yet to come. That's why when you read the 6th chapter of Revelation is when then the number of the Gentiles, the number of the people making testimony for the Messiah. People making testimony are the Gentiles. The Gentiles sharing their faiths. By the end of the 6th chapter, the Gentiles are no more. Because when Revelation then starts in the 4th chapter, and tribulation comes, because Satan the destroyer is going to be released, and then the deceit that was placed in the nearing line set in Shavuot is going to be released from. Then the deceit facet of Satan and Satan himself as the destroyer and deceit, they're going to combine, as it was prior of 1009, before the destruction of the tomb. That's why great tribulation. The Gentiles outside the camp, they're going to be persecuted to the point of then they're going to complain so much when they are then linked with the spiritual nearing line and the camps. Even heaven spoke because of it. What was the words from heaven? They should remain quietly until the number of completion would be then completed. What do you think that means? Until each Gentile is then exterminated, only remains the camps and the beloved city. Do you think it's scary? It's very scary. Because the Gentiles are not going to behold the returning of the Messiah. They are only returning to his elect. Thus then you understand that the time is going to be shortened for the sake of the elect. Elect means set apart. The Gentiles are gone by the end of the 6th chapter. You want an example? You want a proof of it? Try to find mercy, faith, and grace after the 6th chapter. You won't find them anymore. Because the Gentiles are exterminated. Only remains the camps and the beloved city. Thus when you read the 20th chapter in the 9th verse, then they, the evil people of the world, the unsaved, they are going to come against the camps and the beloved city, and they're going to encircle them. When you begin to read the 7th chapter, what does it state? It starts with the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and then the 12th tribes of Israel. Does it not? He's explaining then the 12 tribes. Also from the 1st to the 6th. Why is he stating then the 12 tribes? Because a renewed covenant is closed. There is no New Testament. It was invented. They thought was New Testament because they thought the Torah and the prophets were abolished. The Greco-Romans were wrong. New Testament does not exist. What it is renewed covenant. So then by the end of the 60th chapter, the renewed covenant is closed. No more Gentiles. The plan of salvation of the Gentiles then is done and closed. What you find from the 7th until the end of Revelation is then completion of the prophetic from the previous covenant. If there is a reference of making of then the previous covenant, meant the other covenant was a renewed covenant. That's why then you make a reference from the 7th until the end based upon the previous covenant, and you won't find any more faith, mercy, and grace. The trades of the Gentile living. Or can you find them? You won't find them. Vengeance was never experienced in the earth before. When there was sin in the previous covenant, there were animals to take care of it. In a renewed covenant, we do it by repentance. When vengeance comes, neither. That's why great tribulation. The Gentiles are going to be persecuted until they are exterminated. Thus, when you read the 60th chapter, then you understand. The tribulation was so great that in the spirit they're linking with each of the tabernacles of each camp, has a link with the heaven, and they are constantly asking for help. Tribulation, tribulation, help, help, help. And then even heaven had to speak. And what did the heaven say? Wait for a bit longer until the numbers are completed, or the numbers are completed. Until the slaughtering of the Gentiles then is completed. No more Gentiles. Gentiles are gone. Again, the Greco-Romans were wrong. They did the best they could, but they made a mistake of making a limitation of the number of codexes. They made a mistake with the feasts. They made a mistake in translating visions and dreams. They made a mistake with the anointing versus faith. And we must update ourselves. Only half of the prophets, half of the Torah were completed. And some say, oh, where do you get these translations from? Or it's your viewpoint. So what do you explain in terms of the prophetic shadows to come from the Torah? Now let's ask around. Or do they think that the scriptures were put together as a form of deceit because they think the deceiver facet of Satan is going to be so strong that they can't put up with it? Because the Messiah is not coming back as the Savior anymore. He's coming as the judge. And no Gentile is going to be holding him coming. That's the problem. The Messiah is only going to show up in the 20th chapter. The Gentiles are gone by the end of the 6th. The Shabbat remains the 7th day, as it was before during the time of Shaul, during the time of the Messiah, during the time of the prophets. Never changed, because it's the absolutely solid understanding of the seal of Elohim. The Greco-Romans, they taught by changing from the 7 to the 1st, then they would be in another category. Another mistake. And we must update ourselves. So then we begin to understand the layers of understanding without forcing other people, because what the world is experiencing is an absolutely forcing of Torah and the prophets and the writers upon the people. Whereas the Messiah, when he explained while he was in the earth for his people not to be mixed with the systems of the world, they were to remain in their camps and let the world's system come to them for guidance, as they did before. But then the set-apart people, the elect, decide to scandalize themselves. That's why Israel makes no sense these days. They are involved in trying to build this stupid temple when the temple was not mandated. It's stupidity. There is a reference in the renewed covenant from Yohanan, because much later, when the second service in the camps then are perfected, then Yeshayahu or Isaiah the 61st chapter comes. The renewing of Jerusalem and also the renewing of the camps. The temple was not mandated. It was a gift from David, because David wanted to be obedient to the laws, statutes, and judgments of Yahweh. Then he wanted to build him a magnificent house. It wasn't a substitute for the tabernacle. The tabernacle, model from Moshe, was going to be used in the future to set up holy lands around the world and saving the Gentiles. And we mistakenly, very easily, by church. Church does not even exist, the word of church in the renewed covenant from the Hebraic understanding. It's a foreign word. When the Messiah was asking around his own disciples what was the perception of the people regarding him, who was he? Some say Eliyahu or Elijah. Some say Yohanan ben Zechariah or John Baptist. And then Shimon very strongly say, you are the Mashiach, the son of the living Elohim. And then he replied, anointed you are, Shimon, because heaven did not evaluate you as in the flesh. You are in the spirit. He had a revelation from heaven. He was not speaking in the flesh. The others were speaking in the flesh. And then with this strong understanding and direct understanding from Shimon, he was going then to be in his tabernacles. This is what the Mashiach meant. Elohim was only found in his tabernacle during the time of the previous covenant. His son would be in his tabernacles after his ascension. This is what he meant. The Shabbat is the day of observance yet. It is becoming very popular because the untwisting is returning. The set apart, they are going to release their hands from the world's trade. You can bet on it. In other words, you can be sure it's going to take place. The set apart are going to be shoved back in their camps, as they are contrary people, very disobedient, as the Messiah himself said and the Creator himself said. That's why discipline is coming upon the house of Elohim. There is no church discipline coming upon the church. Does not exist. The word church does not exist from the Hebraic understanding. The truth of it is, there is discipline coming upon the house of Elohim regarding the camps. Where are the Hebrews? Why are they not on duty? Discipline is coming upon them because they're going to release their hands from the world's trades, and they are going to return to their camps, and the Gentiles, they are going to have no more ministries. Each to his own. Gentiles must be shepherded. Set apart must be in their camps. Gentiles, they do not have any ministrations of Ruach HaKodesh, however they can take care of the world's trade. Set apart people, they don't have any of the world's trade, but they have the ministrations of Ruach HaKodesh. 7 spirits of Elohim, 7 functions. And people playing around with this remember crap. Why is the word remember? Simply because at the end people would forget Shabbat. The least of the orders, the least of the law is the Shabbat. There is no big deal in it. It's a simple day when people rest and they try to stay away from work, and they come together for reading and studying of the Word. Couldn't be any simpler. While then the set apart, they are in their camps studying the Torah. And please stay tuned, much more coming up.